Thank you. Mr. Kilmer is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you and the ranking member for holding this member day. It's good to be back with the Armed Services Committee. I'd like to discuss two of my legislative priorities today, both focused on improving infrastructure in and around our military installations. First, I want to touch on the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program, or SIOP, and then the Defense Community Infrastructure Program. I represent Washington's 6th District, which is home to Naval Base Kitsap in Bremerton. Uh, Kitsap is home to one of the Navy's 4 public shipyards, the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard and Intermediate Maintenance Facility. The 4 public shipyards, PSNS, Norfolk, Portsmouth, and Pearl Harbor, are critical in strengthening, maintaining, and modernizing our Navy's fleet and protecting our national interests. The 4 public shipyards perform all of the Navy's nuclear repair and retrofit work. PSNS plays an outsized role for the Department of Defense in its current priority theater, Indo-PACOM, in that it's the Navy's only dry dock on the West Coast capable of performing carrier work. As you know, in 2018, the Navy released its 20-year, $21 billion Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program, or SIOP, to upgrade and modernize our public shipyards. The program will revitalize and modernize infrastructure at the shipyards, increase climate resilience, and improve resistance to natural disasters. The timely execution of SIOP is vital to the Navy's mission, to the security of the work being done in the yards, and to our national security. Any delays or shortfalls in funding for SIOP could result in additional aging and damage to the already substandard facilities, utilities, dry docks, equipment, and information technology infrastructure at the 4 public yards. If that happens, the shipyards will be unable to meet current and future demands of the fleet without continued investment in SIOP. Therefore, in my view, Congress and the Navy need to ensure SIOP remains on track. I've certainly discussed this with the Sea Power Subcommittee Chair. I know he shares the view that this has to get done. And Mr. Chair, I know you get to look across the water from your district at the 130-year-old shipyard in my district, and I would love to invite you and the ranking member to see some of these urgent needs up close and personally. I appreciate your consideration of my request to prioritize the $21 billion currently projected as needed for SIOP, as well as any additional funding identified by the Navy to not modernize our public shipyards in the future. The second priority that I wanted to discuss is the Defense Community Infrastructure Program, or DCIP. This program was created in 2019 to help communities around military installations address infrastructure deficiencies. Grants from DCIP help to preserve and enhance military readiness and security by providing funding for critical infrastructure projects, which support on-base operations and readiness. DCIP is a unique program because it allows the DoD to partner with local communities and share the often expensive costs of infrastructure upgrades. Investments from DCIP in defense communities help make these towns and cities more vibrant, livable, and safe, both for service members and for their families and for everybody else in the neighborhood. All of these investments also help improve the readiness of the bases because ultimately, if the off-base infrastructure is failing, it's that much harder for our service members to get to and from work and to do their jobs. If the roads leading to a base are too congested, that's hurting the ability of the base to most effectively respond to our national security needs. These funds help communities and towns throughout the country, including in my district. Every day, thousands of service members and civilian employees at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard and Naval Base Kitsap commute through a section of congested roadway. During the morning and afternoon rush hour, this normally sleepy stretch of roadway gives LA rush hour a run for its money, turning the road into a parking lot. Not to mention the fact that there are concerns around the climate resiliency of the roadway. As the nearby military installations continue to grow, the concern is only compounded. DCIP could offer much needed assistance and support, not just to Kitsap County as they try to address these congestion issues, but to communities around the country. Ultimately, for the installations in my area and throughout America, these issues are impacting bases and their readiness, which harms our entire country, not just the people who live near and work on these installations. With that in mind, I request that you include $75 million for the Defense Community Infrastructure Program in the upcoming National Defense Authorization Act. Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Rogers, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I urge you to consider taking up these provisions as part of the NDAA, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions that you may have. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. A question is from Mr. Kilmer on both of the issues that you raised on the shipyard refurbishment and on the critical infrastructure around bases. There's a possibility of folding those into the infrastructure, the much talked about infrastructure package. I know just recently I've had some conversations on the shipyard issue. I was wondering if you've had any conversations. We talked before about the transportation piece around bases, but on the shipyard issue, have you discussed that at all as including in the infrastructure package?
I have, and I know that there is a discussion about that. If you look at the potential of an infrastructure package, both to put people to work in the short term and lay the foundation for addressing long-term needs over the long haul, I would argue that both of these issues, both SIOP and the DSIP, are right in the sweet spot there. These investments at our public shipyards, simply put, need to happen for us to maintain our national security. And so I think there is a real opportunity there. Those of us who represent public shipyards and some that don't, including your Sea Power Subcommittee Chair, we have started having conversations around whether it would be possible to loop this conversation in with a broader infrastructure conversation.
Yeah, because this is a real infrastructure issue for us nationwide. Our shipbuilding and ship repair capability is stressed, to put it mildly. Certainly that is crucial for national security and national defense, but it's also an incredibly important part of our economy that we should strive to preserve. So I would be supportive of that. Mr. Rogers, do you have any questions?
I do not, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Any other HASC member have any questions for the three members who just testified? Mr. Courtney is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Kilmer, again, you and I have talked about the infrastructure connection to public shipyards. Again, you're somebody who's studied the SIOP plan that the Navy has put together. They actually are shovel ready, isn't that correct? I mean, they actually have an itemized list of items that they really could move out on very quickly at all four public shipyards. I mean, that's your understanding of the SIOP plan, which again is just sort of sitting out there forlorn, waiting for resources. Isn't that right?
Yeah, there's plenty of work that's ready to roll. I think there's going to be some phasing because it's like a monster game of Jenga at these public shipyards, in that they have to both do the projects to modernize the shipyards and continuing doing the work of the shipyards. So there will be some phasing of the projects, but they are absolutely, to your point, ready to roll on some of these infrastructure projects. And listen, as an example, we had the Secretary of the Navy out at Puget last week. One of the primary dry dock at Puget, he was told will be functionally obsolete in less than 2 decades, and I think by 2034, I think he was told, in terms of being able to service the next class of carriers. So his comment while at the shipyard, and I think the general perspective is these are investments that need to be made, and certainly there seems like a great opportunity to include this in a broader conversation around our infrastructure.
Great. Well, thank you. Again, the public yards, which again operate different than the private yards, again are kind of just totally dependent on congressional action. And that's frankly one of the reasons why it doesn't have the same quite constituency and sort of support, from some of the private sector advocates that are on the Hill. So to me, this is an opportunity in the infrastructure package to do a major catch up in terms of really neglected deterioration in both shipyards. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further